quickly go over it, then we start powering up. What's to do today? Oh, before I forget, when is the final exam? Does anybody know for sure?
No.
It's so complicated because you have part-time and full-time students here. So does anyone have any guesses?
I think the calendar shows May 11th or something, right? Last day of class. So maybe before that.
That's the last day it could be. I think it's the absolute last day. I don't know if that's this final.
So nobody knows. So you know what?
Hoping you.
President Sarah, could you just see if you can find out for us?
I'm already finding it.
It's complicated because there's a recital week or a study week.
Do you want to have it on the last class, or do you want to have it?
When are we scheduled for our final exam?
Do they give you a time ordinarily?
Which Wednesday? Is
Last class. Yeah.
that's last class or okay, fine. I've reached a point in my life where I can't handle things like this. So when is it, Sarah?
I'll get back to you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's do this before we go any further. Some of you in your exams have something like this. What that means is that, Helena, those of you, yeah, this is the questions here. And so what this means is that essentially you kind of wrote everything you knew about the subject, and in there was some redeeming value. So your answer is not fully correct. I just want you to know I'm not asleep. I do know, and I did read it, that something is not okay, but there were some points given. So Langdana is not asleep. Just want you to know. That's what that is. All right, so come on, some of you, there were a couple of 98s, 200s. Okay, let's work through this. Unemployment has fallen to 1.9%, the lowest ever. This means that tons of new jobs are created and record number are working. True or false? What am I looking for here? I mean, you got it right, yeah, Megan?
The participation rate.
Yeah, exactly. You had to bring in some combination of the participation rate. Unemployment rate is U3. That would have been great. U6 is much better. I would have been happy with that. So here you're in the corner office on the top floor, many years from now, some years from now, few years from now, and somebody says, you know, this economy is supercharged over here. Look at the unemployment rate, and you go, excuse me, what's the participation rate? How big is the labor force? How many people are discouraged? Is 1.9% the percentage of this small little group or a bigger group? What's the civilian labor force? So definition of the participation rate should have been in there, or U3 versus U6. So that's where I was going with that. And trust me, this will happen when you are running operations. Some of you already are. Number 2 was a freebie, guys. You're not supposed to leave points on the table with number 2. Is this on? Okay. So come on, help me with number 2. The massive deficit ratio over 10% did not cause hyperinflation in the subprime crisis and in COVID. Why?
Liquidity trap?
Liquidity trap. Thanks, Nick. That's it. You could have said that and walked away. I would have been happy.
A lot.
You know, then some of you said money was not spent, CBAR and IBAR was low. That is like liquidity trap. So some of you talked around it, didn't mention it, that's fine. Some of you gave me the snake bite analogy. If the cobra bites and the blood venom goes into the bloodstream, only then is it poisonous. Otherwise it's not, which is supposed to be true. And so the money doesn't go into circulation, there was no hyperinflation. And it was a new phenomenon. We weren't familiar with it. Yeah.
How many points is each question worth?
Yeah.
The rating scale.
So what happened with you?
What happened? I did, but I'm an auditor, so I wanna know.
Oh, you're an auditor. I'm your worst nightmare. So you lose like -1 to 3 if it's just a little bit, and if it's completely wrong, you generally lose -5 to 8.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay. So 3A. What is meant by the cycle? So my cycles of 1 must be driving you crazy.
It is.
Because my cycles of 1 have to do with breaking rules. And it's a weird concept. Well, here we go. When you throw away the rule book, remember the ones I did in class? When it helps humanity, you're in the corner office, you actually throw it away? Yes, no?
Yes.
What is meant by cycle of 1? This is now before we did some. I know I did some big ones after the exam. What is that? In the concept of Ludwig-Erhard.
Removing price caps.
Yeah, removing price controls. That's what he actually did. But what's the concept here? What was the takeaway?
He made a decision, an announcement.
Louder, please.
He made a decision and he announced it confidently.
But what kind of decision? In what context?
Against the government side?
So here he is. He's alone. It's occupied. He is subjugated. The country is taken over. He absolutely knew he was right. And he just went ahead and did it, and Germany never looked back till this whole Euro mess happened. And they got involved in the whole Eurozone thing. So he was convinced that he was right, he had the engine room, he just did it. So it's an instinctive leadership. And what did he do? I needed to see a diagram. Some of you did not give me a diagram. That's okay. Maybe you lost a point or 2 or 3. So there are price controls, price ceilings, and he abolished it. And whoop, this used to be a shortage, black market. And so he abolished the price ceiling, and whoop, prices went right there, and there was no shortage, no lines. Next morning, 12 hours later, the shops were full. By the way, when I did this in class, I didn't give you the other part of the story. If prices are thought to be too low, P0, too low. This could be US agriculture. This is demand and supply. So in American farming, American dairy, cheese, milk, sugar, wheat, this was thought to be too low, and we have a system of price floors. So we subsidize agriculture. It's called the price floor. And so here we have excess supply. So we pay the farmers more than what the market is determining. So if you go across the border into Canada, you will find sugar being less than half. Wheat, ice cream, milk, peanuts, ridiculously cheaper there compared to us because we have a price floor. And so this artificially higher price to agriculture is paid from our tax revenues, from American taxes. So they're already supported. And these are not mom and pop farmers, by the way. These are massive conglomerates. The mom and pop farmers is gone from America. It's a myth. I mean, there are a few probably, but they're largely gone. So there's an excess supply here. And there was a problem because, especially if you have to store this excess supply, because refrigeration, if it was dairy, it was very expensive to store. And so we actually now pay farmers not to produce. It's cheaper that way because then there's no storage thing. Giving it away free to other countries was also a problem because when you give it free, that country there that is starving and needs food will come to depend on it, and they won't develop their own agriculture. It's called moral hazard. So in my graduate student days, I worked on a project. It was called PL 480, American program. Just taking the food and just dumping it free. Take. And we found that the receiving countries got worse in the long run because there was no incentive for them to develop their own agriculture. You know the whole thing. Don't give the person free fish, give the person a hook, and all that. So that's the opposite. Price floor, down there, price ceiling. And both of them are away from endogenous equilibrium. The moment you take a market out of endogenous equilibrium, you have pressures, you have problems. Excess demand pressure here, and excess supply pressure here. The moment you're away from endogeneity, which is this, you have some issues. Let the markets decide. This timing is perfect. We are going into the classical model today. Those were the free market people, Milton Friedman types, who said, just let the markets decide. So in this semester, I'm going to drag in something else from my international trade course, which is strategic trade. How much should Biden subsidize semiconductor production in America? Should he or should he not? Should he let the smart money decide? Should he let Intel decide? Or should he take my taxpayers' money and throw it at Intel? What's the right way to do this? It's called strategic trade. Should we throw money, 42 billion here, 200 billion here, 1 trillion here? Or just let the smart money decide? Like we decided for fiber optic cable. You and I, we paid for fiber optic cable. Now Uncle Sam didn't pay a cent because it made sense for us to do it. So we talk about that. We bring in something from our trade class. And that was Lily Gerhard. Nadia Karalnik. So that was an interesting one. All you had to do was read that from chapter 6. She was this Russian student of mine. It was very poignant about the Russian hyperinflation, and she talked about her mother-in-law. So that was points on the table. If you didn't read that, you lost a bunch of points. And some of you just made it up, and it was so obvious. The poor Nadia Karalnik, she sold all her stock. I'm going, what stock? And then the Nadia Karalnik, and then, black market developed, and then the SOEs. So they're reading off from my hyperinflation story. SOEs, hot capital outflow. Poor Nadia saw all the hot capital moving out. And I'm going, what are you you're making this up. You can't fool Langdana. If you got a HMMM in that question, it means you tried. Miss Accountant, did you get that one? Probably? Okay. So now you're on my radar screen now.
You underlined some stuff.
Oh,
That means that
yes.
it was good, right?
Let's see what they know. Oh yeah, this I remember. This was interesting. Russia experienced double-digit hyperinflation in a very short amount of time. Are you sure you read this?
I have no idea what you're talking about. If you would have given me like a little hint.
Oh my God, okay, so because she was
read
minus
it.
2, the system works.
This is everything that I read.
Okay, so system works, I got it, she was minus 2, but you were close. Alright. Oh, number 4 was beautiful. That was the broken rhombus, guys. You were not supposed to lose, that was broken rhombus. We did that in class. Explain how the financing of G is different from M. Come on, really quick. Come on.
G.
G is new bonds and M is
Existing bonds. The G is the treasury selling new bonds. That's the auction, chapter 3. M is existing bonds, open market operation. I'm talking to City, I'm talking to Provident Savings. You know, remember they're exchanging existing bonds. That was that. QE, what was QE?
Fed buying bad loans or rotten oranges.
Buying junk, rotten oranges as we call them, rotten mortgage-backed securities, existing bonds, and creating money. It's all from this broken rhombus. Remember that? So number 5. Come on, Martin, help me here. Number 5. Nick, help me here. Jessica, why does Langdana consider NSI to be benevolent? Shravan, help me here. Benevolent form of deficit financing in contrast to a malevolent form. So in other words, there's an evil kind of deficit financing from earlier in history. So when I discussed this in class, I said we are actually not the bad guys that the planet has been making us out to be. Well, at least not in bond financing, you know. And because we are selling a really safe, the safest asset on the planet, the treasury bond. There is no even the people who hate us buy our treasury bonds. China is still sending money back. FYI, I'm sure Russia is probably also buying treasury bonds, by the way. But what was the malevolent one earlier? The opium war, and please, it's not opioid, that's a different thing. So this is the opium war. I don't know, are opioids related to opium?
Yes,
They are? Wow, I didn't know that.
I think so.
They are?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, so that was the opium wars. And we talked about that, Queen Victoria and China being xenophobic and not really trusting foreigners after that. So there is actually a reason for that. Yes, no? Okay. Number 6 was a beautiful one. If the long end of the yield curve rises, it means only one thing: growth is coming. You are supposed to just like jump on that one. What does that mean? Come on. Growth is coming, long end's gone up. So here is the long end going up. Come on, Mark, help me here. So you have this situation.
It could also mean inflation,
Inflation.
unsustainable deficit. It doesn't just mean growth is coming.
Thank you, Nick. So basically, long end going up means pi e is going up. Are we okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so pi e going up, that's all that you can get, or risk going up. That's all that you can immediately get with the first click. Then you click again to figure out, okay, what is the real story? What is causing this pi e to go? R is typically constant. And so therefore, so what could be pushing pi e out? And so there are many stories. One could be, yes, growth could be coming. That's the one that the market likes the most. And that's the default explanation for all those talking heads on TV. Growth could be imminent. So which diagram would I show here? Come on. Thank you. We just AD today. And then, thank you, AD. So this is the nice, happy scenario. Y higher in the future. growth is coming. So this is what P0, this is P1, and this is 5E going up. So this is the default story. Aha, growth is coming great. But there could be another story. But what's another one? Come on, Varun. Help me here.
The supply could be reduced.
Ah,
Cost push.
ah. So here we go. Cost push in the future. So this could be another reason. P0, future, and clearly Y lower in the future. So it's not clear. It could be this story. So that's the problem. It's an identification problem. Those are just two diametrically opposite cases. The long end will go up here, and the long end will go up here too. But it's the second click, the deep click, that will tell you. It could be another story. What else could that be? There's no diagram for that. Colleen, help me here. Dave, Dana, Victoria, Connie, help me here. Could be another story. Jose? Yes, excellent. Could be deficit non-sustainability. Perfect answer. So you just had to jump on this one. And you all knew this. You just had to kind of figure out, okay, that's the answer right there. This comes up later too, I think, in the article, if I remember right. When you clicked on the article, it's in there too. You could have just referred me back to this one.
So Professor, can I ask a question related to this yield curve, or maybe later?
Go ahead.
Recently I was reading an article from Powell, and someone asked him a question that the yield curve is flat and the recession is coming. So his argument is that is one aspect to look at, but you also look at the yield curve between 90 days and 18 months, and according to him, the yield curve is rising between.
Yeah, so basically our American yield curve is a weird looking one right now. It used to be like this, and now something like that. So at the short end, short and middle end, we are seeing it rising a lot more. The big fear for recession is that the yield curve starts doing this number and starts inverting. So that would be the fear of recession. But according to what Powell is saying and what we are seeing the last few days, we are seeing more and more and more of this. Yield curves going higher and higher up to the 5-10 year region.
So is that good or bad?
What's happening here is inflation is coming, but the long end isn't really moving that much. Why? Because there's massive capital inflow coming into our country. So capital is pouring into America from Russia, from Ukraine, from Central Europe, from China. Huge. So what you have here is supply of loanable funds, demand for loanable funds. So right now in America, we are having this supplies coming in, pushing interest rates down too. So we have this weird situation where capital is coming in, pushing our rates down, but the Fed is trying to push the rates up, and this capital coming in is also accelerating our growth. It's pushing up our stock market, it's pushing up housing prices. I told you how many of my Chinese students are buying houses here without seeing them. Seriously, last week another one. Professor, this one or that one? 3 here, 1 in Canada, and they finally chose 1 in Tennessee.
So if the rates are going to go down because of the supply of funds coming up, Fed probably needs to increase the interest rate significantly
Yeah, he's
further.
talked about 6 times. So this is like, spitting in the wind. There's a wind blowing on your face, you could spit harder and harder, so to speak. It's going to be enough. Remember, much of this is for public consumption. There's a liquidity trap. When there's a liquidity trap on the downside, there's going to be a liquidity trap on the upside. When rates went from 6 to 0, nothing happened. Nobody was impressed. C-bar and I-bar was low. When rates go from 0 to 6, I'm not expecting that much difference. There's a liquidity. C-bar and I-bar are out to lunch. No one was borrowing before, unless they're buying houses or refinancing. No one's going to borrow now. But mom and pop America, like, oh my God, he's going to stand on the brakes. Oh my God, let's get out of stocks now. So there's all this drama on Wall Street. And it's for public consumption. And that's the problem with macro. Okay.
Professor, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So with Russia recently, so it made its bond payment, its first bond payment to investors, and then also it just said it was going to have everybody pay them in rubles for their energy exports. Do you think that that's a temporary fix, or do you
Yeah,
think
so
that would be-
so when the German hyperinflation happened, the Germans made the first payment. So when we discussed this in class, the French reoccupied the German Rhineland. Sorry, the Ruhr, where the industrial heartland was, after World War I. And so the Germans went on strike. That's 60% of the workforce. So the German government said, fine, go on strike, because the French had come back in. And they had occupied it, and they were feeling good about it. And the Brits joined them. We didn't want to, but we finally tagged along. And so they went on strike, the German workers, and so German government sold bonds. They made the first payment. Then after that, they couldn't. And the money started collapsing. So Russians have made one payment. Let's see how long they last.
And then do you think that the currency will be at all saved because they're now demanding rubles for energy payments instead of?
Yeah, I mean, no, the C-bar is gone, the I-bar is gone, the Germans are now moving away. We pushed the Germans. What happened with the Germans is we spent their gold. So remember that story? So the George W. Bush, Dick Cheney administration, and this is not a conspiracy theory, they left their gold with us. Fort Knox, actually. Dick Cheney spent it. I told Dick, I said, Dick, don't spend it. But who listens to me? Anyway, and so the Germans basically stopped trusting us. Then came Trump. We pushed the Europeans away. So they went towards the Russians, again for oil and fuel. Now they're pivoting away. And China is trying hard to get in there and try making the yuan a global currency. But you know what? For a global currency, you can't just advertise and say, hey, we're going to be the next big, excuse me everyone, we are the next global, it doesn't work that way. Global currencies are endogenous. It's like greatness, it's like respect. You can't say, hey, I need more respect, okay, it doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way. It's endogenous. You get it without asking for it. China's not there yet. And the way they're playing this game, they're not getting there. Now, if only Biden can hit the ball in the open goal, we will see. But China's very practical though. China's very smart, very pragmatic. So China knows when to be neutral and move away. That's how they've survived through history. But I may be wrong.
But I mean, even I was reading, even India is trying to have a mechanism of dealing with rubles and buying oil. So I mean, if they buy oil in rubles and then maybe do like a barter system or something, would that?
Yeah, fine. It's very embarrassing actually, but fine. They're on the wrong side of history, sadly, this time. And the Russians did not support India in the 1962 war. They supported China. So India conveniently forgets that. And guess who supported India then? JFK. John F. Kennedy sent weapons and blankets and medicine. But the Indians don't know that part of the history. They're still mesmerized by the help the Russians gave in some other war. Don't know your history? Well, you're doomed. Embarrassing. Okay. Power back up. And what was the next Oh, this was a beautiful one. Do I say that for every question? Come on, some of you got this right. This was one of those gray boxes, guys. You just had to read it once. It was one of those gray boxes, the missing Asian bond market. Come on, funny. No, you got it right. Number 7. Come on, Shravan.
You just told us the answer.
Tell me more, what does that mean?
They didn't have a bond market?
They didn't have a bond market. Shravan, why?
I don't know why they didn't.
They were savers.
They were savers.
Oh.
They didn't need to borrow. They were fiscally frugal. You know? So they didn't need to borrow. So they didn't have a bond market. And they didn't have a bond market meant there was no radar. Because long bonds give you warning. It's advance warning that something is coming. There was nothing going up to say inflation is coming. So when overheating happened, wham! It was right there in their face. Like, whoa, when did this come from? So there was no radar, no forward, and no warning, no indicator, because they weren't borrowing. They were fiscally virtuous. And so then they started issuing long-term bonds, not because they needed to borrow, but because they needed advance warning. So Singapore went from, I think, 2 years of 5-year bonds to 20. Increased the power of its radar. Taiwan went from 5, I think, to 20. They said, we need some long-term radar. Next time we want to know something's happening, instead of being taken unawares and being wrong-footed, like they were in the Asian crisis. The 8 was a freebie. 4 Biden. Okay, come on, how would you do this one? This is the simple ISLM. Today we are going into maximum ISLM. I hope the power level is good. Okay, so here, C0 plus I0 plus B0. This was a nice horizontal aggregate supply, which is all going today. Okay, come on, what did you get here? Eric, help me here.
You're decreasing N,
Nick, decreasing M, and then
Decreasing G.
decreasing G,
decreasing G.
and decreasing C bar and I bar.
Wow. So decreasing M. How would you do that?
Goes up.
LM moves this way, right?
No, the other way.
LM to the right. Yep. What am I doing wrong?
Left.
Left? Okay. Decrease in M. And then IS jumps out, right?
Push to the left.
Right?
To the left.
Left.
Down and to the left.
Then, is this in the way? Is this any better? I know what that means. Has anyone used this, by the way, in any class? Should we try it next class?
Sure.
And then if I do it, it'll be projected on the screen, and then can be emailed to you, but then you won't take notes. And then what happens is, by getting notes mailed to you, there is a sense that, okay, I got this. So people have found that when electronic notes, you don't actually learn. So we can try it. We can have a session with this. All right, come on. What happens next?
Your AD curve moves to
What happens next? Come on.
your AD curve moves to
Yeah. I go down. That's what you said? So my very low. Come on, Sarah. Twinkle. Bedelia. Nick.
And the goods market.
Thank you. Everything lines up red, red, red. G1 less than G0. C1, what do you get here? Less than C0, since both C bar and Y fell. And I1,
Well, that would depend, right? On the ratio.
is ambiguous. But typically, finish a sentence for me, Nick. Jessica.
Typically lower.
Typically, I1 less than I0, since effect of I bar is the biggest. Effect of I bar is huge. And then from the handout, I just want to do one. Most of you nailed the handout. There's one that was a deep click, which is B. B as in boy. So B as in boy. Consumers, so here is consumption function. This was a deep click. And this is after-tax income. All right, so after adjusting for inflation, consumer spending, which is C, was up 1.5%. While household income after taxes was down 0.5%. And I said, hint, see a few sentences below. So what was that? Come on, Jason, help me here. Neil, help me here.
Stimulus cash and jobs being added.
Yeah, Nick, but in the context of that expression here, the hint is this sentence right here. Rising wages.
Oh, W.
Yes.
is up.
Yes. Did you just get it?
I got the question right. Yeah.
Yes. The rising wages and bank accounts fattened by government stimulus programs have also given people cash to spend. So this wealth effect. This is the hint. Some of you said C bar went up because you figured something else had to go up, right, for it to go up. And so I went, yeah, sure, because later on it tells you C bar has gone down in Number D, it's going to go down. It will also weaken consumer confidence, which over time will lead customers to pull back. So, yeah, fine. And in class, to be honest, I kind of dropped the W and blended W into C bar, so fine. Shouldn't have lost any points there. Here we go. Oh, yeah. All right, so the rest was straightforward. Unless you have any other questions in the handout.
Will the final exam be like this, just like this?
Final exam will be just like this. It'll be actually mostly. Sorry, guys. It'll be after the midterm exam. So it'll be most of the material will be the center of gravity will be after the midterm exam. And it'll be shorter, not nearly as much fun. It'll be straight down the middle. There'll be an ISLM, there'll be articles. We'll be doing inflation today from ISLM. We'll be doing supply side economics. Yeah, Dave, you had a question. Some of you said the reason that C went up was that C bar was high. And I let it go. You might have taken a point off at most, but if you made an argument that C bar went up, fine. Because later on in the article they say C bar is going to go down or is going down, so I let it go. If you lost 5 points, that's like what most people lost if they didn't do anything right there. So talk to me, show me later on what happened.
Our last class is Wednesday, April 27th. Yes.
So that's the final exam then.
That's the last day of class. There's an exam period, but that's our last class day. They haven't sent, like for the full-timers in the fall, they sent out an official exam schedule because we were taking classes as a cohort, but we didn't get anything like that this semester.
You know what, let me talk to Doug Miller and explain. I have a composite class of part-time, full-time, let's see what he says. If you make travel plans, we'll work around it. It's all good. If you graduate, you're graduating soon after that. It's all good. I'll double check. Thank you. So Dave, I answered your question?
I thought the final exam, I think it's 11 because we have a paper on the 10th.
I can't hear what you're saying.
Saying we have a paper on the 10th, so I was assuming the final result will be on the 11th of
Maybe. I'll look at.
Where did you hear that from though?
We have a supply chain exam on the 10th, so I was assuming.
Oh, supply chain. Well, we figured it out. If nothing, if there's an extra session, I can have a help session, or we can go over some international trade. We can do anything, or it'll be an optional session if we have to have it, or have the exam early. We'll work it out. Whatever we're supposed to do, we do. It's crazy that they left this open and ambiguous.
Well, in one of our courses, the professor has given us a period in which you can take the exam, like a 2 or 3 day period. So, I mean, if you want to have more lectures, we can have something.
We'll work it out. Okay, can I move on now? Anything about the exam from the article? So it'll be mostly after the midterm exam, but having said that, for the final, everything is cumulative here. I mean, this consumption function goes back to the first class, so it's all tied into everything else, but the center of gravity will be material covered after the midterm. Oh, the multiple choice questions, the bonus questions. So what was I can't remember them. One was Milton Friedman. What was the question?
Wrigley's government.
Oh, what was, the Rutgers building?
Oh yeah, we almost named it after Milton Friedman. He refused because we subsidized him when he was a kid. Then he changed his mind but passed away before he could. Then it was the gum. What was the gum?
Wrigley's. Double mint.
Double mint. Do they still make it?
Yep. I think so.
And then the last one was? Oh yeah, Cournot-Nash equilibrium. I can't remember in what context I asked that. What? Oh, the gas stations, right?
Gas station and Great Wall of China.
And same thing with sanctions, you know. So I was doing a session for Intel yesterday, 2 sessions with Intel, and they were talking about sanctions because they're microprocessors and semiconductor chips, right? And so they're talking about sanctions, and we did Cournot-Nash for them, and I showed them how sanctions will only work. It's a Cournot-Nash basically. If all parties agree to do the sanction, if one party says, yeah, we'll supply you with semiconductor chips, well, then all the others have just lost money, and they lost market share. As one, so it's not, that setup is not a Cournot-Nash equilibrium. It's like those minimum taxes that Janet Yellen said. The whole planet has to have 15% taxes, not any lower. Well, the Swiss said, you know, we're gonna go lower. Then they finally, we got them to agree. But as long as one country doesn't play along, that setup is not a Cournot-Nash equilibrium. A Cournot-Nash equilibrium is when no party can make any more moves and be better off. Just remember that. If any one player can make a move and be better off, so here we are banning high-end semiconductors to a certain country. And that's not stable. Because there's always a chance one country will go, fine, you guys don't sell to that country, I will sell to that country. And so that country is better off. That is not, by definition, a Cournot-Nash equilibrium. It should be designed so no one can make any more moves. That's why CVS is next to Walgreens. That's why there are 5 movies on Lincoln in the same year. That's why everyone's doing research in one kind of genetic drug. Just pop, 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 just in case that's the right kind. And they all cluster together. Classical model, maximum power, stay with me, and here we go. So we are going to have masks throughout the semester then, from what I understand? Dr. Victoria, what's it like out there? Is this thing behind us?
There's really not that many hospitalizations for COVID anymore.
You don't have any?
I mean, there's like 1 or 2.
Wow.
Cases are going up though.
And none in the ICU right now.
None in the ICU. So this thing is going finally, doctor?
I think so.
Well, cases are going up in China and Europe and everywhere, so I mean it's probably going to come over here at some point. I guess.
I heard that was because they didn't use mRNA vaccines in China.
Well, Europe used it, right? So,
They had AstraZeneca.
Israel is going up too? So I'm going to take my 5th shot. I've taken 4 already. Doctor?
Maybe it'll help it can't hurt.
That's what they all tell me. Hey,
who knows?
Did you get your IgG levels tested?
I,
oh yeah, that blood thingy? The look on the finger?
No, you have to actually send it out.
Look, I just go to cvs.com and I try and get on and they say, yeah, come over. And I show up. And a very nice lady gives me another shot. And she says, there's no room here. We're going to put it on the other side. And I'm like, yes. So every few weeks I just try and I show up. More is better. Remember that. So it's coming here, neutral?
possibly. Well, it's history, right? I mean, that's how it spread from China to Europe to US.
What's in China right now is Omicron only.
Yeah.
Is it Omicron?
It's a different subvariant of it.
What's it like in India, by the way? Is it gone?
No, it's low.
You're living life as if it's gone.
Fair enough.
Alright, so here we are, the first real, so last time we started the classical model. Stay with me now. And so this was the model before Keynes. So there was Keynes. And then we had supply-sider. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but the classical model is very important because it's a first cousin. It's related to the supply-side model. And I showed you that last time. So it's a first cousin. This is why we're spending time. This thing was before the Great Depression, but these guys here, the modern day supply-siders, they're also called the new classical model. So they're very closely related. So is there like a graduation ball? The dance thing, it's actually happening with masks.
And the MBA program office is responsible for that, but there is going to be an event that will.
Want
take
to tell them
place.
about it?
It's not my event. I don't have like official details yet, but it'll be the week before graduation and it'll be open to both part-time and full-time students.
Doesn't seem to be much interest or excitement. There's no resonance here. So,
I mean, it's gonna be a nice event, from what I understand. It's gonna be like, catered, there'll be alcohol, of course.
now, suddenly there's going to be interest.
DJ. I won't be there, I'm not graduating. It's run by the MBA program office. on
Oh,
the
so
sixth
this is
floor.
something that's, you're not
It's,
involved in
I'm
this?
not,
Okay.
they key me in, but I have no bearing
Okay.
on this and I don't have anything to do with the planning.
Thank you. So here we are. Last time we set it up, and here we go. We had a production function, we had the labor market, labor demand, labor supply. I defined the real wage here, that's in units of goods. W over P. This is N0, this was employment. Please look over this, folks. This is N0, this is a production function. This is Y0. This is a production function. And we talked about why it was shaped like this. Can anyone remember why it's curved? It's not straight up. This is employment.
Is it diminishing returns?
Yes, thank you, Nick. Diminishing returns. The more people you hire, output goes up, but it goes up by less and less and less because capital, so output supply is some function of capital and labor, and capital is fixed for now. So only labor is allowed to vary. So output supply is some function of labor. So that's why the more workers you hire, output just doesn't keep growing because they only have 250 computers here. And so everyone's using the computers and this output finally maxes out. You know, last person just goes out for coffee. Here is a YY reflector. Here is the firewall, which means you can't move from this diagram to that diagram. Firewall. And this is PY space, in which we will derive our first real aggregate supply. So this is going to get real today because we're bringing inflation into our story. So we're going to go blazing through chapter 8, we get into chapter 9 today. And the crucial assumption in the classical world was what? Do you remember? What was the fundamental assumption? So this is before Keynes, this is before the Great Depression. The fundamental assumption here, I don't know if I told you this or not. Thank you. Percentage change in P is equal to percentage change in capital W. So in other words, this is the bedrock, very critical definition, assumption here, and we will see that when this assumption broke down, the whole paradigm came crashing down. We got our first paradigm shift. So that's a very important assumption. It says that if inflation is 3% in this world, your paychecks go up 3%, like that. If inflation is 7%, your paychecks go up 7%. And why did they make this kind of assumption? How? What was the logic?
Are you asking the logic which is behind why they assume this?
Made this assumption.
The value of what you can buy remains the same.
Yeah, but where did they come up with this assumption?
Well, I remember you saying something about there was the assumption that everybody who wanted a job could get a job or something.
Exactly. This is what they saw.
Yeah.
So this is macro. This is not physics. So looking out their window in the roaring 20s, this was the world. If inflation was 2%, wages went up 2%. If prices went down 3%, wages went down 3%. So this was flexible wages, adjusting fully adjusting wages, fully adjusting nominal wages. This is what they saw. This is what they built in. This is the world before the Great Depression. So, and please understand, it's not a preposterous assumption. This holds true in Western Europe, France, Germany. Inflation is 3%, well, that paychecks are gonna go up 3%. It holds true for you mostly. High-end labor, highly skilled labor. If inflation is 3%, you're working for one bank, they're gonna give you 3%, or you'll go to another bank. By working for one pharmaceutical house, BMS is gonna match inflation, or you're gonna go work for Johnson & Johnson. So it holds for you too. So it's not completely preposterous. We will see that it doesn't hold in emerging economies. If inflation is 8% in India, China, Argentina, Brazil, Malaysia, Nigeria, wages might go up 1%. This is for the whole country. So emerging economy story is different. I'll take you there step by step. So stay with me now. Let's derive the classical aggregate supply curve. Maximum power, folks.
I'm so sorry, Paul. Can I ask, is it Y and Y on the top?
Yes, this is a YY reflector.
Okay.
So basically, this is just going to reflect light from here down there.
Okay.
It's like the periscope we built as kids.
Got it.
I built, you know. All right. So deriving the classical aggregate supply. Step one, plot the given point. P0, Y0, and Py space. And Jessica, I'm going to see now how we use the reflector. So here we go. So when the story begins, prices are P0, it's capital W0, over P0. So when the story begins, prices at P0, outputs Y0. So what, please look at me. Please look at me. So this is Y0. And y0, that's your y reflector. And prices are P0, so just plot it anywhere, like that. Okay. Step 2, increase P0 to P1. For example, P1 is equal to twice P0. So now we're deriving the aggregate supply. We don't know what it's going to look like. Is it vertical? Is it positively sloped? Is it negatively sloped? We don't know. So prices have gone to P1, and now you tell me what happens next. Based on that assumption, what happens next? Here, Sharon, here.
Wages go up.
Usually, what?
Real wages.
Yeah.
Is it just a downward curve?
Yeah, maybe. Yahi, Honey, Jose, Eric. Wow, Leah. Is there more? Yeah. Are you allowed to look in the book? Okay, so basically you're right, this assumption, right Leah? Right here, this one. So in this world here, it was an interesting world. We said wages and prices here, here, W and P are fully flexible. This is a huge assumption. So what happens here now? Leah? So prices have doubled. What happens to your paycheck?
It doubles.
Doubles. It's a drastic example. So prices may have gone up by 1.2%. Wages would go up 1.2%. But let's make it double. And so by the assumption, by the classical assumption, nominal wages, capital W, also increase in the same proportion. It's very powerful, folks. And so we have W1 is equal to twice W0. So wages and prices both doubled by assumption here. What happens next? Step number 3. Good move. Sorry about that. Much better. Step 3, what happens next? Calling. What happens to real wages?
It should increase.
Stays the same. And so, therefore, real wages stay the same. Thanks, Connie. Stay the same. W0 over P0. And now, W1 over P1, which is twice W0, twice P0, which is W0 over P0. So they both, therefore, real wage still at little W0, the same. That's small w0. So nothing happens to the real weight since they both change in the same proportion. What happens to employment and what happens to output? Look at the diagram. Step 4. What's that?
So it's still in the same place.
Yes, thank you. Very cool. So step 4. So output, so employment. Still at N0. And output, where's output? Still at Y0. So here look at this. The ratio is still the same, they both doubled, so the ratio is still the same. N0, Y0, so output still at Y0. One more step and then we are done. And so step number 5. And so finally, plot P1, Y0, and join to P0, Y0 to give us the classical aggregate supply curve. And this is very important because this is the same aggregate supply curve the European Central Bank used to use. The ECB, Milton Friedman taught us about. The supply side is Reagan, Thatcher. So coming soon, the classical aggregate supply curve. What does that look like? What? Yeah. Thank you, Mark. So look at this. So prices are at P1, right? Prices went to P1 and wages doubled. Prices doubled, wages doubled, so the ratio was the same. Employment was N0. Outputs Y0 from the production function, you just kind of line it up. Y0 is the output. Prices are P1. Here we are. Here is 5. And here we go, folks. The classical aggregate supply. So it's a vertical line. This is before Keynes looked out the window, before the Great Depression. This was the world, and then when Reagan shows up, Margaret Thatcher shows up, this world will come back in a different form. But for now, here we are, our first vertical aggregate supply curve. And you will see Dana and Lizzie, that was your Netanyahu's world, that's that. Yeah, Nick?
What does N stand for?
The N is number of people working, N is employment. That's from last class, the labor market, employment, N0. So now we are in a world where we have a labor market, we have production here. In about 2 or 3 classes, productivity will come here. Innovation, technology, 5G, 6G, 7G, in this diagram. So this diagram, which is just sitting there, will explode. It's coming. So when we come back from our break, let's take 15 minutes. We're going to do the ISLM with this baby now. I'll do one in class, you do one. We'll talk about Adam Smith Then we get into the Keynesian model after that. Thank you, folks. Let's take 15.